The letter arrived on a stormy evening, carried not by the mailman, but left on my doorstep, as if by unseen hands. The envelope was thick, crafted from a peculiar waxy parchment. The seal, a dark red sigil resembling a serpent consuming its tail, seemed to pulse faintly under the dim light of my apartment hallway. My name was scrawled in an elegant hand, the ink glistening as if still wet. Inside, the note was simple, yet compelling. Dear, we are pleased to offer you the position of Chief Curator at the Orbis Occultus Library. Your skills and qualifications are uniquely suited for this role. The library is located in the Black Hollow Mountains. Room and board will be provided. Your primary responsibility will be to catalog our ancient collection. A car will arrive at 9 p.m. tomorrow to transport you. We await your arrival. Sincerely, Monsieur Severin. There was no return address, no phone number. Nothing to indicate how they had come to know of me. Yet, as I read and reread the letter, an odd sense of destiny took root. My freelance work as a researcher and translator had barely been keeping the lights on, and the promise of stability, especially one tied to books, my passion, was irresistible. At precisely 9 p.m. the next night, the car arrived. It was an old model sedan, sleek but unmarked. The driver, a silent figure in a long coat and hat, opened the door without a word. The ride was smooth, yet disorienting, the scenery outside the windows blurred, the forested roads seeming to shift in impossible ways. The library revealed itself suddenly, looming against the backdrop of jagged peaks and swirling mist. Its spires clawed at the sky, the stone black and wet like onyx. Lightning cracked overhead, briefly illuminating a facade carved with grotesque gargoyles and twisted vines. The heavy oak doors creaked open before I could knock, revealing a gaunt man dressed in a stark black suit. Mr. Severin, he introduced himself, his voice cold and measured. The interior was no less imposing. Endless shelves stretched into the gloom, filled with leather-bound tomes that exuded an almost tangible weight. The air smelled of age, paper, ink, and something sharper, like iron. Severin led me through the labyrinthine aisles, his long fingers gesturing towards the far end of the library. Your primary task is to catalog the collection, he explained, his voice barely rising above the eerie silence. Some volumes are marked with this. He showed me a crimson sigil identical to the one on my letter. And under no circumstances are you to open them. Do I make myself clear? I nodded, though unease prickled my skin. The library is alive in its own way, he added cryptically, before leaving me alone in the vast, shadowy expanse. Days blurred into nights as I worked, poring over books whose spines bore languages long forgotten. The library's silence was not peaceful. It was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of ancient shelves or the faint rustle of unseen drafts. Shadows stretched and twisted unnaturally in the dim light of the antique lamps that barely illuminated my desk. It began with faint whispers. At first, I dismissed them as my imagination, a byproduct of the isolation. But they grew louder, their tones indecipherable yet insistent, like voices muffled behind a heavy door. Sometimes, as I worked, I'd feel a presence, something just out of sight. But when I turned, the aisle behind me was always empty. Sleep came fitfully, my nights plagued by dreams of pages turning themselves, the words bleeding from their margins to form cryptic symbols that burned into my mind. One night, I woke gasping, the sensation of cold fingers brushing my neck still lingering. One evening, as the wind howled outside, I found it, a book bearing the crimson sigil Severin had warned about. It rested on a pedestal in the corner, as if placed there deliberately. The cover was bound in dark leather, embossed with symbols that seemed to shimmer faintly. My rational mind told me to walk away, but curiosity gnawed at me. What secrets could a book hold that warranted such strict prohibition? I hesitated, but the whispers surged, growing louder and clearer as though urging me forward. My fingers trembled as I opened the cover. The pages were impossibly cold to the touch, and the ink seemed to shift and writhe, refusing to settle into coherent words. I began to read aloud, compelled by some unseen force. The moment the final syllable left my lips, the temperature in the library plummeted. The lamps flickered violently, then extinguished, plunging the room into darkness. A low hum filled the air, resonating through my chest like the vibrations of a massive bell. Then, the whispers came again, not faint and distant, but loud, urgent, surrounding me on all sides. My heart thundered as I fumbled for my flashlight, its feeble beam slicing through the suffocating dark. The light fell on a row of bookshelves, their spines dripping with what looked like ink, thick, black, and alive. The shadows around me coalesced, writhing and twisting as though something was trying to take form. And then, as abruptly as it began, the chaos ceased. The lamps flickered back on, their glow weak but steady. The book lay closed on the pedestal, its cover pristine. But the air had changed, heavy and charged, as if the library itself were watching. I stepped back, heart pounding, and realized I was no longer alone. I should have left the library that night, abandoned the job and fled into the storm that raged beyond its ancient walls. But fear has a way of rooting you, paralyzing rational thought. Instead, I stayed, convincing myself that the strange events were nothing more than tricks of an overworked mind. It wasn't real, I told myself. It couldn't be. Yet the library begged to differ. The next day, I found ink-black footprints leading from the pedestal where the crimson-marked book had rested. They were enormous, easily 3 times the size of a human foot, and trailed deep into the forbidden section, a part of the library I hadn't dared explore. I followed them cautiously, my flashlight barely cutting through the thick shadows. The whispers were louder here, insistent and angry. As I moved deeper, the air grew colder, the oppressive stillness giving way to a subtle vibration, as though the library itself was alive and breathing. The shelves became taller, their spines more grotesque. Some were bound in what looked like skin, their titles etched into the flesh in languages I couldn't read. The trail of footprints ended abruptly before a towering shelf that seemed to stretch infinitely into the gloom. At its base lay the crimson-marked book, open to a page I hadn't seen before. Its letters glowed faintly, their patterns twisting and changing as I stared. My skin crawled as I realized the words were no longer confined to the page. They spilled over the edges, bleeding into the air like smoke, forming shapes that coiled and writhed. The whispers converged into a single deafening voice that filled my skull with a single command. Run. I stumbled back, but it was too late. The air behind me thickened, and a guttural sound, a low, bone-chilling growl, emerged from the darkness. Slowly I turned. A figure loomed in the aisle, its form obscured by shadows that writhed and pulsed. It was massive, its head grazing the tops of the shelves. Its eyes glowed faintly, burning like dying embers, and its outline shifted as if struggling to hold a solid shape. It didn't move, but its presence was suffocating, filling the space with a dread that turned my blood to ice. Instinct took over. I bolted, weaving through the aisles as the thing gave chase. Its movements were a cacophony of scraping and guttural snarls, the sound of its pursuit echoing through the labyrinthine rows. I didn't dare look back. When I finally reached the main hall, the thing stopped. It stood at the threshold of the forbidden section, its form writhing against some invisible barrier. For a moment, I thought it would retreat. But then its ember-like eyes locked onto mine, and its voice, a rasping, guttural blend of fury and despair, spoke a single word: Unleashed. The lamps around me flickered and died, plunging the library into an unnatural darkness. I backed away, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Somewhere behind me, the whispers began again, louder and closer. I wasn't alone. The library had become a living nightmare. Shadows moved independently of light, creeping along the walls and pooling in unnatural places. The air was charged with an oppressive energy, and the once faint whispers had grown into a ceaseless cacophony, voices overlapping in a symphony of torment. Severin found me pacing the main hall, my hands trembling as I tried to make sense of the growing chaos. "You've done something," he said, his voice cold and accusing. His usually stoic demeanor was cracked, his face pale and lined with fear. My voice faltered. I opened one of the marked books. His expression darkened. "You fool. Do you have any idea what you've unleashed?" "I didn't know," I snapped. "You didn't explain." "It doesn't matter now." He cut me off, his tone harsh. "The library is unraveling. If the book is not returned to the void, the horrors it contains will spread." What void?" I stammered, but Severin was already moving, gesturing for me to follow. He led me to the heart of the library, a place I hadn't known existed. The air here was heavier, and the floor sloped downward into a cavernous space lined with shelves that seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive. At the center of the room was a massive black void, a swirling vortex of shadow and light. Its edges shimmered, distorting the space around it like heat rising from asphalt. "This is the library's core," Severin explained, his voice grim. "It is a gateway, a prison for knowledge too dangerous for the mortal mind. The book you opened is a key. It has begun to destabilize the seal." The void pulsed, and I felt a pull, a faint tug in my chest, as if it were drawing something from me. The sensation was sickening. "What do I have to do?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the roar of the vortex. Severin handed me the crimson-marked book. "You must enter the void and place the book back in its proper place. But beware, the entities unleashed will try to stop you." I hesitated, my hands trembling as I gripped the book. The air around the void was frigid, and the pull was stronger now, like invisible hands grasping at my limbs. "Why can't you do it?" I demanded, panic rising in my chest. Severin's gaze was distant. "The library chooses its keeper. This is your burden now." Before I could protest, the ground beneath me shifted, and I was pulled forward, the void's darkness swallowing me whole. Inside there was no sound, no light, only the weight of an ancient presence pressing against me. Shapes moved in the dark, their forms impossible to define. The whispers were deafening now, their words unintelligible yet filled with malice. Clutching the book tightly, I began to move toward the faintest glimmer of light ahead, the sense of unseen eyes watching my every step growing stronger. The void was a labyrinth of shadow and whispers, a place where time lost meaning and gravity became a suggestion. The air was thick, each breath a struggle, and the darkness pressed against me like a living thing, wrapping around my limbs and slowing my every step. The book in my hands burned cold, its weight unnatural, as if it resisted my every movement. Shapes loomed in the periphery, impossible figures that twisted and stretched like shadows cast by broken light. They didn't move closer, but their presence gnawed at my sanity, their forms an affront to logic and reality. The whispers were no longer voices, but a chorus of screams, their overlapping tones rising and falling in a discordant wave. Ahead, a faint glimmer of light pulsed weakly, my only beacon in this nightmare. As I stumbled toward it, the entities began to move. At first it was subtle, a ripple in the dark, a shift in the oppressive shadows. Then they came faster, their forms converging into massive shapes with grasping limbs and hollow, glowing eyes. One lunged at me, its shape an amalgamation of jagged edges and gaping voids. I dodged instinctively, tripping over my own feet and falling hard onto a surface that wasn't solid so much as it was a suggestion of ground. The entity's miss brought it crashing into the abyss, where it dissolved with a sound like shattering glass and tearing flesh. I scrambled to my feet, clutching the book tightly, and ran. The light grew brighter, though the ground beneath me warped and shifted with every step. The whispers were louder now, forming fragmented sentences that clawed at the edges of my mind. The keeper falters. The knowledge must remain unsealed. You are not worthy. The words burrowed into me, each syllable a dagger of doubt. My legs grew heavy, and my vision blurred as exhaustion and fear sapped my strength. The entities were closing in, their monstrous forms coalescing into a single towering shadow, its ember-like eyes burning with rage. Finally, I reached the source of the light, a towering pedestal of black stone etched with glowing symbols. At its peak was a recess shaped perfectly to fit the book. The void around me shuddered violently, its darkness roiling as if it could sense my intent. With trembling hands, I raised the book. The shadow roared, its voice a guttural blend of fury and despair that shook the very air. It surged forward, its limbs stretching and twisting, reaching for me. Time slowed as the whispers reached a deafening crescendo, urging me to stop, to give in, to surrender. But I didn't. With every ounce of will I had left, I slammed the book into its place. The moment the book connected with the pedestal, the void erupted in a blinding flash of light. The entities screamed, their forms unraveling into streams of black mist that spiraled into the vortex. The whispers ceased, replaced by a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through my bones. The light grew brighter, consuming everything, and I felt myself being pulled, torn apart, and reassembled all at once. My consciousness stretched thin, unraveling like a thread caught in an infinite wind. And then, all at once, silence. I awoke outside the ruins of the library. The towering structure was gone, replaced by a jagged scar in the earth. The sky above was clear, the storm that had raged when I arrived now, a distant memory. I sat up slowly, the weight of what I had done settling over me like a shroud. The book was gone, the whispers silenced, but something within me had changed. My reflection in a nearby puddle was unfamiliar. My eyes glowed faintly, their irises tinged with the same ember-like hue I had seen in the entities. As I rose to my feet, a voice echoed in my mind, calm, yet filled with ancient gravity. The keeper endures. The words sent a chill through me. I understood now what Severin had meant. The library was gone, but its burden was not. The knowledge it contained, the horrors it guarded, was now bound to me. Even now, I can hear the faintest whispers in the quiet of the night, feel the pull of the shadows that linger at the edge of my vision. The library may be gone, but its legacy remains. I have become its newest guardian, its newest prisoner. And somewhere in the farthest recesses of my mind, I know the library waits.